I'm just going to play you this, right, because there's academics, right, and, people who have doctorates and professorships and things like that. They immediately have their own belief and claim that they're immediately acting, for the greater good, right? For the greater good, everything they do is, to promote positivity in everything, and no one else, can be right, yeah? Let me just play this little clip of this Adam Youssef guy from the Green Party, right? He's approaching this, Raise the Colours campaign, because apparently they've heard they're in their area, right? Putting their campaign material up, which is happens to be these flags, which the flags actually qualify as a patriotic item, right? They're a patriotic item of nationality. This is set in law, right? And they also have a special tax band, a tax qualification, so they're even exempted from certain taxes, right, in law, because they've got a special classification in law, right? Because you don't even pay tax on them. And people can choose to use them for their campaign as well and adopt them in any political cause, right? And on this occasion, this Raise the Colours campaign are campaigning against illegal immigration, specifically unlawful immigration, people who are coming across also dangerously on boats. It's not normal behaviour. It's not actually, everyone else pays to travel, or pays to go on the plane, or pays to go on the train, and is forced to have a passport by our government, and we have to pay, quite a lot of money for it. And they made us update our documents, they made us all they took our paper driving licenses off us, give us plastic ones. They're heading towards this digital ID thing, which ties in with all the facial recognition. Big Brother Watcher campaigning against all that facial recognition, although I'm not suggesting Big Brother Watcher against immigration, but definitely I would have thought they're against illegal immigration, right? So this Adam Youssef basically is giving that Raise the Colours campaign a hard time, right? Calling them far-right and racist and things like that. Now, my position, right, I'm purely doing law, right? I've been studying the law for what the law actually is and the rules. So it's more like a referee position, and actually even more so than the police, like trying to do an actually more competent and better job than the police when it comes to political rights. Now, the thing with Extinction Rebellion, right, and Roger Hallam and Gail Bradbrook, and then all the other groups you get around it, which I will put the Green Party in on that, although Extinction Rebellion don't always agree with the Green Party anyway, right? Jonathan M. Fuller, people like that, is that they're trying to make out that, it's all to do with racism, purely racism, or and negative things, and not necessarily actually to do with the population and to do with the lawfulness of it all. Illegal immigrants, unlawful immigration, when everyone else is being forced to pay a hell of a lot of money for passports and things like that, and, made to use proper normal travel. Now, my argument, like, in the sort of middle ground for all of these campaigns has been like, look at Chris Packham. Chris Packham has got a campaign, and he's got a mission which is actually in line with Greens, right? It's ecological and it's natural, and it's, to promote the animal welfare. This is not even humans, there's a lot of people who are arguing about racism or religion or whatever, and Chris Packham's like, trying to protect and defend animals, which aren't even humans, right? Then they're not actually even humans. They're actually just animals like foxes. And even some of these foxes have been attacking, people's pets, like, ducks and hens and chickens and things like that. My friend's got an allotment, and she had chickens and ducks actually attacked and killed by a fox. But, Packham was wanting to protect and defend foxes from fox hunting. And so this is not even human. This is humanity, but not even between humans, between animals, right? Now, I just can't see how Chris Packham's vision for more rewilding of England and more spread of the ecological landscape, or even reclaiming some of it and protecting it from deterioration and overbuilding and overpopulation, I just can't see how that whole idea and mission can fit in with this mass unlawful immigration, which is skyrocketing the population. You know, we've gone from 60 million to 70 million, and they're saying that it's going to go to 80 million or above quite quickly, right? So that's my position. I get on with people, right? On a daily basis, right? I talk to people of all different races and religions, right? You know, I don't refuse to talk to them. I'm not nasty to anyone. You know, a human person. But what I'm finding is, I am finding now that through Facebook and through academia and things like that, a lot of these academics, they're not only policy obsessed, right? They're obsessed with policy and rules, right? So they won't do anything that follows the law or says they've got to legally do it. If someone's inserted some business or corporate policy that tells them not to do something, or even though if it's not lawful. So they're being controlled by these corporate policies, which I think the universities are putting in there. And also, they're not even right a lot of the time. They don't even actually know the law itself. And particularly when it comes to political rights, I mean, the evidence in all the arrests of, you know, Defend Our Jews and Extinction Rebellion shows that they didn't know the law, right? But this Adam Yusuf guy from the Green Party, I'm gonna get around to playing this clip in a minute, right? But he's accusing them of being antisocial or anti-human or whatever, or far-right or racist. But what I'm finding is, when I'm ringing up shops now, particularly affluent ones like, you know, bookshops and things like that, they don't have the time for you. They don't actually want to talk to you. They want you to email, right? And they don't actually, and I actually think they're prejudging people by their accents as well, like class level. And, you know, if you walk into a shop, right, you expect to get served. Not like be put on hold or whatever, or, you know, they seem, when they're selling things, you know, online, it's just like, oh, it's already sold, it's a sale, so that they can put things through. And it seems to be going into sort of like, almost like as if it's like some sort of Amazon automation, you know. And a lot of the academics who are running businesses really don't even like talking to people or replying to people anymore. I've emailed quite politely a number of professors, right, in this field of area, like Jason Pesey, you know, Brodie Waddle, Karen Bowie, and they don't, very rarely they'll reply, or just reply in brief with a short, you know, response. They don't actually want to talk to you. But yet, when they're doing their papers, they're doing this, oh yeah, you know, we're fellows, and, you know, their students are coming out as if it's the most brilliant experience in the world. So they're quite antisocial, and they're quite cliquey to their fellows and university groups, and they don't seem to want you know, talk to other people. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of universities, mainly in America, not actually in England, that are putting a lot of information out there for free, right? There's a lot of universities in America that are scanning books for free. So they'll scan those books for free and have a website, and you can just read them, and they don't charge you. And that is brilliant. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Not every single book. Some of them is like limited search in the book or whatever, but there are a lot of them that are for free, right? And, you know, that's good. But still, it's still removing interactions, you know. They are doing you a favour and they're putting the information out there, you know, and when these people release reports and, you know, do papers and things like that you can access, that's good. I'm not complaining about that. But it's the actual socialising part of it. And this is just coming across as a normal citizen, not even connected to politics. In fact, you're connected to the subject. You're showing actual interest in the subject itself, right? So let's just play this little clip of this Yusuf guy. I don't know if it's going to play it from the start because I already watched it, but I might pause it and make some comments on it while it's going through it, right?
absolutely. All I'm doing here is putting a flag up with that in our country.
These are not going to be here on Monday, I guarantee you that.
Everyone you take now, we'll see you back up, mate. Right.
The Razor Colours were here. I heard on my way home from work that they were...
Oh, so he heard on his way home from work. So what's this? Have they got some kind of intel thing? Have they got some kind of like network, some sort of like spy network, or like, you know, a monitoring network between the Green Party, right, of other campaigns, right? That seems like stalking to me. You know, they actually, rather than not liking or not caring of the campaigns, it seems to me that they're actually very, very interested in these other campaigns, to a fact where they're taking notes on them, classifying them, quantifying them, investigating them. It seems like they're very, very, very interested in them, rather than, you know, other people are doing a campaign, we're going to do our campaign, right? Now, in Parliament, right, if someone puts a private bill to try and get a law passed, they could not tell anyone about it and sneak it through, right? Because it would be brilliant if no one opposed it, right? It would be absolutely fantastic if no one opposed a private bill, right? Because then you could just get it passed a lot easier, right? If you could pay a parliamentary agent to draft it up and get it put through. But you're legally required to put it in a newspaper, right? You've got to put it in a newspaper, and you used to have to put it on church doors, because you've got to inform other people that you're trying to get a legislation through, so they've got an opportunity to oppose it, right? Oppose it by gathering, you know, signatures in opposition, or by, you know, promoting the opposition to it, right? But you've got to put your notices up, and you've got a legal right to put your notices up and adverts to oppose it, right? But not take the other people's material down, because that would be illegal and against standing orders to not let them put the newspaper adverts. Now, public petitions, right, is not private bills, but public petitions is an alternative to private bills. It's for asking for a general remedy. It means that you ask for something doing, and the government will decide what they're going to do about it for you, rather than you writing a specific act of law yourself. But you promote public petitions, right? And you get signatures and you promote the cause, right? Now, this is the thing. What this Adam Youssef guy here from the Green Party, and he looks like, you know, he could be a professor at a university or have a doctorate or something, you know. He's clearly related to ecology, to the environment, and you know, he's active in political causes, right? What Adam Youssef needs to do is get the parliamentary practice book and read the section on misconduct against petitioners, right? Because it's actually, the thing with petitioning the government is that you're meant to be protected from the police and the authorities and so forth under the jurisdiction of Parliament, the authorities. But not when you're actually attacking or intervening or acting against other causes that are also to Parliament, right? Because they are privileged like your causes, right? And it's actually it's contempt of Parliament to intervene in other person's causes. It's not lawful, and besides the fact, it's not good sportsmanship, and it's unfair. If you don't believe in something that someone else believes in and you're opposing them, right, then you do your own material, you put your own material up, and you promote your own cause against it, right? And because if you take the other person's material down, that is a contempt of Parliament, right? It is contempt of Parliament. And I've had to actually learn this, right, you know, because, you know, on the odd occasion before I knew that, you know, on some rare occasions, I've taken down, you know, like, you know, one or two Conservative Party voting boards. But I actually was looking at them. I was actually, the truth is that I was interested in them for legal purposes and evidence, right? Because I wanted to know, you know, what information has to be on them and things like that, and have a look at them for exhibits in evidence, right? So I'm going to claim that I seized one or two for evidence, but, you know, I'm not going to, you don't claim every single one of them. I didn't go around taking all of them down, right? Because I wouldn't need all of them. That's actually intervening in the campaign. I mean, you can argue one of them just either for a piece of evidence or to inspect it or look at it, right, as an exhibit. But beyond that, then you're actually intervening in the campaign and you're not gathering evidence anymore, right? You know, maybe I could have taken a photograph of it, but I also want to have a look at the construction, right? So, you know, and I'm happy to return it as well, right? So, but I didn't know at the time that you're not supposed to intervene in other campaigns. Now, this Adam Yusuf guy, he doesn't know the law. He does not know the law of England, and I don't think he cares about it. And if he does know about it, and if he's still going to take down other people's political material and intervene in their campaigns, he is far right. He himself is far right because he doesn't believe in sportsmanship, fair play and rules, and he doesn't actually follow the law. He's acting illegally. Now, you might say, well, what about all these campaigners who are, you know, sometimes breaking the law? So look, right, we're protected from criminal offences, right, misdemeanours when we're doing political campaigns. And Extinction Rebellion and, you know, Just Stop Oil have completely failed in that because they've got, like, you know, Tim Crossland, who's rubbish at law. He's the worst lawyer ever. But when it comes to this is like when you are sparring against other campaigns that have got parliamentary causes, right? You're both on the next level. And it's contempt to actually intervene in the other opposing campaigns because it would be the equivalent of if someone's trying to get a private bill through Parliament, somehow the newspaper's saying that we won't let you advertise in our newspaper, right? Which is illegal. They've legally got to let you advertise in that newspaper, which is like in America, freedom of the press, right? And, you know, you had to put your notices up on church doors. It was required and things like that. And public petitions is a lot more of a free process than private bills. Private bills is regulated because you've got to do things that actually the petitioner might be reluctant to want to do because it works. In private bills, you don't need to rely on like the general public weight of the common signature, right? You can just get like a parliamentary agent to pilot it through, and you can get a few supporters, and it's normally financially backed. It's all financially backed, like with the best lawyers and experts to put the private bill through. But then you do have an opportunity where the public can, like, you know, oppose it or whatever. But they've got to go through the proper processes, right? Now, I can guarantee Adam Yusuf, right, if he started intervening in the private bill process, he'd know about it. And that's when you'd start getting, like, you know, if a big company or water company or electricity company was trying to get something through Parliament and he was, like, you know, obstructing it, taking the notices down or interfering with the newspaper adverts somehow, you know, ringing the newspaper up and telling them not to put them in there, he would definitely find himself facing contempt charges, although it doesn't seem like Parliament are running the contempt charges so much anymore. But I know the culture, media and sport are doing, and I think when it comes to newspapers, they might be able to take action. But for public petitions, right, it's the same rules. Contempt against petitioners, misconduct against petitioners, right? It's the same rules. So Yusuf is unwittingly and unstupidly going into, he's being far right, and he believes that, it's a just cause. They're all just causes when it's the usage of Parliament, right? And people are wanting to get certain changes made to the Constitution or to the country. Now, as far as I know, right, and I aren't taking sides on it, but look, as far as I know, the boats that are coming over, they are classed and have been officially confirmed as doing it unlawfully. They're not using the passport system, the ferries and the boats and the planes like everyone else is doing. I know they've got some flights coming over apparently, right, which is separate, but those boats, they're not lawful crossings, right? They're unlawful, they're illegal, and there's a right to defend and protect the country against unlawful people coming into the country. In the law of England, right, if you give shelter and refuge to people who aren't here lawfully, right, they are in law criminals and enemies of the country, and it's treason, right? So Yusuf needs to check his law. But this is the thing. Adam Yusuf might say, I want to help these people. I don't care if it's treason or against the country because I believe in humanity. But that means that he's disregarding the law of England, or there's certain laws that he doesn't care about. And when you get to that level of intellect, you might as well say, well, I don't care about kicking someone in the head. I don't care about robbing someone's purse. I don't care about stealing someone's car. I don't care about this or that. National Rebellion have been breaking windows, but as far as they've been doing it and putting paint on buildings, they're not happy with what these businesses and companies are doing. They've been breaking the law and they've been getting prosecuted, but there was an argument for them doing it as an advertisement, right? As an advertisement or campaign. Now, is Yusuf making an advert for the Green Party, right? You see, when... And Yusuf will probably roll his eyes, to this and fall asleep, right? But he's not. It's actually what he's doing in law legally is more illegal and worse by attacking and intervening in the Raise the Colours campaign than if you throw paint on a building or crack a window to do your own campaign, right? If you're trying to argue it under the control of advertisements as making an advert and representation, right? Which Extinction Rebellion have failed to prove that under that act yet, although they sometimes go off with juries, right? But the juries have been forgiving to them breaking the law. They're wanting the juries to forgive them for breaking the law, right? So, but what Yusuf's doing is actually contempt now. He's got into contempt, and we don't currently have much enforcement from Parliament because Parliament's got to enforce it, right? Now, when the courts, we're meant to use the Parliamentary Papers Act 1840, and you use Section 2 to stop criminal charges against you when you're doing proceedings for a campaign, right? And if Section 2 fails, you go to Parliament and you're meant to get a certificate from the Speaker, and he's meant to use it under the Parliament Act 1911 as well. And it's meant to stop the proceedings, and that actually is supposed to prevent any unnecessary contempts, right? Because it just puts a stop to it. But now it's not actually just the courts now. We've actually got campaign against campaign, right? And that is actually contempt, and they need to be called into Parliament. But I'm sure that if I report this in, to the Speaker, to Lindsay Hoyle, he's unlikely to call Adam Yusuf into Parliament for contempt against the Raise the Colours campaign because they just don't care, right? Parliament doesn't care. The MPs don't care. Jeremy Corbyn isn't going to be bothered because they aren't even doing those proceedings at the moment, right? It's unenforced. Now, the only way to enforce it is either to get the police to back you up and help you by explaining the law to the police, or by enforcing it yourself, right? Physically. You've got a legal physical right, and then you're going to get actually into physical contact between campaigns, right? Which, at the moment they're being amicable, that they're just talking about it, right, and debating and discussing it with each other, and they're doing things backwards and forwards to each other, right? But ultimately, if you want to enforce the law and protect your campaign, you're going to have to use physical force to do that. So, are the Green Party prepared to get into a fight over it? This is the thing. So, but my point is that Yusuf's like, oh, I'm the greater good. Everything I'm doing is for the greater good of humanity. I'm right, and you can't possibly be right. In fact, you're wrong. But actually, Yusuf doesn't know the law, right? He's acting purely on a morally motivated basis, on what he believes is right and what he believes he wants the world and country to be like. And anyone who doesn't believe in that or agree with it is wrong, and what they're doing is wrong and not right. And he's morally going to act against it, And even Jonathan M. Fuller was saying that, I'm not happy about all these flags. I like the flags and I support them because I like football, and I want the England flag up at football matches. And Jonathan M. Fuller has said, I've got all these flags here, someone's put them up, and then I don't know who took them down. I can't remember who took them down on that occasion in Essex, right? But Jonathan Fuller's like, someone bought these flags, that someone owns them, and they need to be returned to the owner, regardless of, who put them up or whatever. Someone bought them and someone owns them, and he said, I want to send them back to the owner of the flags, right? So that shows some level of honesty and truth in Jonathan M. Fuller, right? Even if he's opposed to the cause, but he made a video about that, right? So, you know, what you see, what the Green Party and Yusuf need to be doing if they want to play by the rules and law. And by the way, it's clear that, you know, Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, the whole tactics is that, oh, we don't have to follow the law, right? But they didn't even, I don't think they care. Extinction Rebellion weren't really, I don't think they were that bothered about proving their political rights, because I think that even if they did prove their political rights, even if Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil and Insulate Britain did manage to prove that, you know, they could do those advertisements and not be prosecuted for misdemeanors, I still think that they would try to do more things that were even more illegal, and that they actually didn't actually care about the boundaries of, you know, what's in the immunities. They want to actually act as unlawfully as possible to cause as much disruption as possible. And I suppose that is when you're starting to get into terrorism, right? And then you're prescribing these, you know, Palestine groups. But at what point are they going to prescribe, you know, Burning Pink or whatever with Roger Hallam? You see, look, right? This is absolutely clear. Roger Hallam was prosecuted illegally. There's no doubt about it. The newspapers, right, who went into his private Zoom meetings, right, and reported him in, they didn't know the law. And they caused a lot of trouble, right? Hallam was planning to put signs and notices up over the roads and highways, over bridges and on poles. You can do that, right? You can do that. He got charged with a public nuisance, which is nuisance is misdemeanor, right? It's not even indictable, right? And even if you plan that, you're protected from summary criminal and civil charges, right, for your proceedings, putting the signs and notices up. Political campaigns don't have to pay to put their material in public, and they're legally allowed to put them anywhere in public that's public land and public owned, not on private land or property, right? And when it comes to highway bridges and things like that, businesses are paying to put their things on highway bridges, and the councils are approving it and saying that it's not dangerous, right? So Hallam and that people, you know, there are light up digital movie boards over motorways now. It's not deemed a distraction. If you fasten them on safely and securely, and they are securely fastened, right, and they're not going to blow off like and go over cars and things like that, they're lawfully on there, even if the police don't like it. And if it makes a commotion while they're doing it, tough. Look, these big 3D digital movie boards in London, right, create a distraction, a commotion. They draw a crowd. People might look at them while they're driving. People might look at them while they're crossing the road. People might be distracted on them, you know, while they're waiting at the traffic lights and not see the lights change. But no one's getting prosecuted for that. The government and councils approved it all. They said, this is big money, this is big profit, and we like all this fancy stuff, even though, like, you know, it could be deemed as a distraction or dangerous. We're going to say that we're going to allow it. But then they're prosecuting everyone who's, like, you know, holding and using and looking at their mobile phones. The police aren't trying to bring civil case or criminal case against the businesses who are using the advertising boards. The council approve it, and the police just accept that. The police accept that the local council authority and government approve big movie boards over motorways, and the police cannot say it's a distraction, right? Yet they want people to look at them. So the police are like, anyone who puts a suitcase of money on the table, right? The police are like, you know, money buys, money buys, money buys. Yet these rights don't need money. Well, obviously, you know, you've got to pay to get your banners and signs printed unless you steal them, right? But, you know, at bare costs. We're talking about for advertising space. It's publicly owned space, right? And public land and public property that the taxpayer owned, that everyone contributes, the whole of society. And if someone puts something on there, then someone else can put something to oppose it, right? But this whole thing about taking things down, is that it not only is it theft, it is actually contempt, right? It is contempt. So Adam Yusuf, you know, and this is when you're getting up to Carla Denier's level, right? You're getting up to the level of Carla Denier and people like that high up in the Green Party. They don't know the law. They haven't been able to defend and protect their rights properly. You know, you've had those hunger strike victims in prison, and Jeremy Corbyn, you know, did a 50 MP signed open letter, which it's a miracle because I don't think there were 50 hunger strike victims. So I don't know how MPs can act for people when it's not your MP, but MPs never do anything for me, or there's very few MPs who get back to me, maybe 2 or 3 when they're not my MP, right, or who take the effort to ring me up. Steve Wivenden, you know, he sort of rings people back a little bit, right? But I think they're quieter over in Wales, although it's a big county. Montgomeryshire's a huge county, but it's quite quiet over there, right? And, you know, they do contact people, business people who are interested in investing in those areas, right? But they make out they can't contact anyone else, right? They have meetings with people who don't live in the area who want to invest there. But when you've got a person who's got a problem or issue in that area who doesn't live there, they don't really want to contact people, right? So, you know, trying to educate these people is very difficult. And I think that if the Greens haven't been able to understand the political law properly and the political rights, even when they're very interested in it and even when they want to use it, how can they understand the ecology properly? How can they understand how can they understand the science and the nature behind, you know, all the environment and what's happening to the planet if they can't actually understand basic law properly, right? Now, a lot of this public law and civil law is done by people like Tim Crossland, right? And Tim Crossland is clearly of the same ilk and education as Professor Mark Elliott, right, who's teaching people public law and civil law at Cambridge University, and he's been misteaching them the law, and he's been incorrectly teaching them the law that EU law has swept away all the rights of this country and constitutional law of it, or mostly it has, right? Well, that's completely and totally wrong. It's utterly wrong. And I think that the thing with Yusuf and, you know, Tim Crossland and, you know, Mark Elliott and people and Extinction Rebellion and, you know, Jonathan Fuller and people like that is that they're all about this EU law and the Human Rights Act, you know, the right for freedom of expression and, you know, freedom of speech and things like that. But they actually don't advocate it. They're actually against it because they're going around and not letting people have the freedom of speech and not letting people have the freedom of expression, right? Because they're blocking other people's campaigns and things like that. When other people are acting in their campaigns to uphold particular laws and rights of the country, laws and rights it's those laws and rights which they believe are swept away, which they actually don't care about. Things like the Act of Settlement, you know, treason laws, monopolies, you know, enemies of the country, nation and state and things like that. Now, the thing with Yusuf is like, oh, you know, I'm a humanitarian, you know, we need to help welcome all people, whether they're, you know, whether they're here illegally or legally, we don't care. But I'm sure that, look, if it was Putin, right, and Russia, and if it was Russians who were coming over on boats and they actually were, you know, taking notes for Putin and, you know, taking note of all the military bases and what's going on around. So I had to like free up some memory space on the memory card then. So look, right, if it was like, depending on what the country is, right, if it was people from Russia coming over here on boats, right, like these other immigrants are, or if some of them were Russian and we didn't know, right, and they were starting to put themselves in strategic positions for Russia, right, that would be seriously concerning and alarming with the fact that, you know, we could potentially be going to war with Russia and they've got, you know, nuclear weapons and missiles and an army, right, and they've even made threats to the country. How do you know some of these people on boats aren't actually from Russia or Russian, you know, and putting on different accents. You don't know, right? So there's that when people are coming home and they're not coming, when people are coming over and they're not coming through the passport office, and they're not coming over like, you know, normal civilized people, you know, through the airport, through the passport office and boats, planes, etc., and they're just coming over on random boats, you don't know what country they're from, right? And when they're illegally, right, they are here criminally, and they are, when they're criminals and not even from this country, they qualify in class as enemies of the country, and putting them up is actually illegal. So I don't know what Starmer's doing, right, with the ones that are coming over unlawfully and getting put up, because that actually is a treason offence. It's actually a treason offence criminally, and it's quite serious, right? It is in the treason offences of the whole country, right, to do that. So when it comes to this Adam Yusuf and the Green Party, I think they need to be very, very careful, because they are acting like, hey, you know, we're EU people, we're EU law people, you know, we vote Remain, we vote for the EU, we like the Human Rights Act, we like this freedom of speech expression, but, you know, not freedom of speech and expression of the people who are opposing us. But he's making out that, you know, this... He's making out that, you know, this Raise the Colours campaign are completely far-right fascists, but I don't see them going around spitting on people, using nasty foul language at foreign people, refusing to talk to foreign people, or using violence against them. They're just actually saying that they're coming into the country unlawfully, illegally, right? It could be Russians coming into the country unlawfully and illegally, and for all we know, they might be, right? You know, they could be putting plutonium-7 or uranium-6 in the water. We don't know, right? If they wanted to, it would be a lot easier than, sending a nuclear missile and nuking everyone, because that would be the waste of a whole country and buildings, which they could easily occupy after they've killed us all off without any damage to it, right? You know? So I really think Yusuf needs to reevaluate himself as a person and educate himself in political rights, because the thing is, these EU people who are being trained like by Mark Elliott, right, and who are doing the EU law, they don't actually believe in any of the English constitutional rights and laws, and they don't know them, and they're the laws that have given us our freedoms, so that he can even do these campaigns. Because look, I can guarantee you now that Extinction Rebellion and the Green Party and Just Stop Oil and Defend Our Juries, if we was under that Chinese regime now, they'd all be banned from travelling, right? And they wouldn't be allowed to buy their materials to do the campaign. They probably wouldn't even be allowed out of the house, right? They probably wouldn't even be allowed to go buy a Costa coffee, right, or a Starbucks. And this is what Big Brother Watch are trying to teach and raise awareness of, right? Big Brother Watch are trying to raise awareness of all this facial recognition and scanning, and the fact that it's heading towards that Chinese government. So Yusuf would probably be himself locked down, right? Yusuf and Extinction Rebellion, and possibly even Jonathan N. Fuller already. Jonathan N. Fuller probably wouldn't be allowed to get the train to London, right, because of his involvement in those campaigns if we were under that Chinese government. Now let's play a little bit more of this.
Yeah, on Monday, I guarantee you that.
Everyone you take now, we'll see you back up, mate. Right.
Raise the Colours were here. I heard on my way home from work that they were in the area, so I drove directly to where they were. I found...
So, like, heard they was in the area. Does he know how many Russian people have come over on boats? They could be bringing uranium or plutonium over, or, putting in the drinking water, right? They could be, if the Russians wanted to, wouldn't it be a lot easier now for Russians to, like, gradually send a few of their KGB agents or SWATs over? I mean, not even on the plane with a normal passport, like on boats. A lot of people who didn't want to go to war and get conscripted in Russia, right? They left Russia, right? It could have been a strategy. How do you know the Russian people didn't say, all right, we'll pretend that like all these people are leaving Russia, but we'll set them up to get ready to, take out a few power stations in England, right? Just look at what Extinction Rebellion have been doing, right, and Just Stop Oil. they've attacked these buildings that make weapons, right, because they're against wars, right? And they've been trying to use an argument in court, you know, that they're stopping war, but they're actually detained under the Terrorism Act. Now, the police are totally crossing the line illegally because they're arresting people who with just signs, who are holding signs, right? It's not illegal to hold a sign to call for Parliament to act, right? Just like, because it's the proceedings of Parliament and you're trying to get people to support the cause in order to Parliament, right? Holding signs and banners is like witness appeals and like private bill proceedings for putting notices in newspapers or on church doors, right? And the police have got it wrong. And Tim Crossland has been completely rubbish in that. Carla Denier has been really rubbish in that. Jeremy Corbyn and the rest of them haven't been able to stop the police from doing those arrests. Now, the ones who have been a bit more extreme, like, you know, damaging buildings, you know, there is an argument under the Criminal Damage Act, but that you're getting onto malicious damage, and this is when you're getting into the area of the actual people in England are actually being accused of doing terrorism acts. Look, what Youssef has got to accept is this, right? People on his side, in his campaign groups and in his, like, extended circles, right? We know what they've been doing because they've been arrested by the English government as criminals, not as protesters or campaigners using political rights, and they failed to prove and have the courts accept they lawfully did those actions as political rights. The state, the government, has classified and quantified them as terrorists, and they're using terror measures against the country, our own military, and the people, and they've locked them up in prison without a trial yet. They're being held without a trial. We know about that because it's in the newspapers. And MPs have been campaigning against it, right? And 50 MPs have, but the police, Crown Prosecution Service and courts, right, have said that these are terrorists. So Youssef and his buddies, his pals, are at the moment terrorists. Never mind far right, never mind racist or extremists, they are terrorists. Unless they go into that court and prove that they were privileged and they aren't terrorists. But they can't even do that. They won't listen to us to use the Parliamentary Papers Act to say it was a proceeding to Parliament and to use the rights, right, for them to do their adverts and raising awareness of those actions, and that it not be unlawful, right? Although there is a case going through the court about the Palestine thing, whole thing being unlawful, but you shouldn't need to do that. The arrest of people with signs is not lawful, and even the police, right? I think that this whole, like, grudge that the police have been taking their signs off them all for their Palestine things, right? They're a bit miffed with it. Oh, the police have taken our signs when we've got political rights. So what Youssef's doing is, oh, if the police are taking our, Palestine signs when we've got rights and we know it's unlawful, we're going to take down all the, raise the colours flags, and we're going to do to raise the colours what we don't want. We're trying to stop the police doing to us what we're actually doing to raise the colours. What Adam Youssef effectively is doing is saying, like, where, all the Stop Palestine groups and Defend Our Juries are stamping their feet and, complaining and moaning and going to the High Court because the police are taking all their signs off them, right, and intervening in their campaign, and they don't think that police should be doing that. But yet what Youssef's doing is taking down the signs of another campaign and intervening in it. So Youssef couldn't be a bigger hypocrite. Youssef is, he's terrible. He's the most retarded, stupid, unfair, unsportsmanship, fickle and stupid person ever, right? And the leader of the Green Party needs to understand this, right? And Carla Denier needs to understand this, right? Yusuf is just a mess of a person, but he's presenting himself, right, as though, like, I'm Dr. Doolittle, or Professor Hinkle or whatever. He's like, I'm an affluent, educated man, neatly trimmed with a beard. I must be somewhat academic, and I've got a nice smart Green Party shirt on. So I've got to be, I've got to be right just because I've got a smart Green Party shirt on and a nice trimmed beard, right, and grey hair, and I look like a professor, right? But his law's wrong. His beliefs are wrong. His morals are wrong. And he is the hypocrite. Just because he's passionate about a certain cause. What he needs to be doing is, assessing raise the colours where they're putting the flags, and maybe putting Free Palestine next to it, but he can't do that because then he'll be getting arrested, right, by the police himself, or putting Green Party flags on, or, but this is the thing, if Yusuf started to put up, signs saying, effectively, what Yusuf wants to do is welcome illegal immigrants, not legal ones, illegal ones. Yusuf wants to put up signs, right, that say, we welcome illegal immigrants to England, right? But that's treason. He's committing an actual offence there. And, political rights, I'm going to protect you from misdemeanours, right? But not felony, treason, or breach of the peace, supposedly, right? Although I don't know what's happening after the Bill of Rights. But treason definitely, wasn't necessarily supposed to be protected, right? Unless, I don't know, if you look at what Graham Smith's doing, with abolish the monarchy, right? Clearly that would be treasonous, but, so I don't know, he's welcoming foreigners in here allowed if you're doing it for a political campaign. I'm quite certain if they were welcoming Russians over, and trained Russians, large numbers of trained KGB agents, or, even if they didn't have weapons, if they were just trained like MacGyver, if they had skills like they could, like, make a bomb out of a piece of chewing gum and a paperclip and a bit of, like, a lump of horse manure, right? If it was Russians coming over in dinghies who had all been trained like MacGyver, to make, like, bombs out of, like, a horse poop with, like, a paperclip in it with, like, some chewing gum wrapper or something, right? Then there would be alarm bells being rung, right? Because at any moment they could suddenly, like, take out all the power stations in England with a paperclip, piece of chewing gum, and a rabbit poop, right? And it wouldn't be just Extinction Rebellion, like, stamping on the roofs, pulling bricks off, filming it, right? Try to raise awareness and tell the government that they don't agree with the war, rather than, all these illegals coming over could sneak into the, when Putin gives the signal, right, they could, like, just push a little button on a little, like, mobile phone and set off their, paperclip with a rabbit dropping and, take out all the power stations, right? So Yusuf, he really needs to stop being a child and a full-on, full-fledged retard, right? He doesn't know the political rights in England. And, the EU law, the Human Rights Act, provides in section 6.6 that the public acts done by the public authorities are separate from acts done pursuing bills or legislation through Parliament, which is petitions and bills, right, which is 6.6, which is using the privilege of Parliament, right? It's not an act of a public authority. I don't know how the EU would be able to have, like, the European Parliament and the European parliamentary privileges, and how the European Parliament members would be privileged, but it's meant to have more than the British Parliament. So, Yusuf, he's neatly presented and trimmed, but he is not the correct position of the argument at all. What he's doing is he's actually acting. He's a hypocrite, because what the police are doing to stop Palestine is what he's wanting to do to raise the colours, and maybe it's a reaction, maybe it's like a lash out, because that's being done to them, but I don't see Raise the Colours actually being particularly nasty to foreign people. I haven't seen a video yet where they've actually, used violence or refused to speak to anyone, from another country or nationality. That's racism, not saying, look, we've got a country and we'd like it to be, a certain population and protect the nature and the environment and things like that, which, I don't actually really know what Chris Packham's ultimate vision actually is, but if he's wanting to do more rewilding and reclaim more of nature at the moment, he's not going to be able to do much of a job out of it as we're growing, from 60 million to 70, 80, 90, 100. Like, if it's going up in chunks of 10 million at a time, I can't see it. I can't see people being happy about it, particularly when some people like living in rural areas or in the edges of towns with some countryside. They won't be happy in the place that they live, right? And there are plenty of countries around the world where there's a lot more space and a lot more scope for building and development than in England, right?
And I spoke to them and I explained.
Whoa, he actually spoke. He spoke to them. You look at him, he's putting a right smile on his face. Well, I spoke to them. But normally if someone rings me up, like, Professor Dinkle, right, if it's Professor Mark Elliott, right, or if it's like, Professor Jason Peacey, right, like positioning the public and print, medieval print, late modern history print, right, it's my favourite subject. I'm quite interested in that. I like to speak to Professor Jason Peacey about that, speak to the anchors of face ain't listening, right, It's like, I spoke to him. Well, in this modern age where, you push to get an email from these people or, if they like your comment or reply, they don't want to give you, they won't even give you the space of 5 minutes on the phone to talk to them. In fact, they won't even give you their phone number. You can't write to them because they don't know where you live, right? I spoke to them. Well done. Well done, Adam. You spoke to him. It's the first person you spoke to today. Because, all these VIPs now, Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, are so busy, meeting VIPs like Roger Hallam, having, training sessions and meetings that, they don't speak to anyone else, except, we're going around door knocking. Yeah, right, they don't want to engage with the public at all. I've tried to engage with them. They don't want to engage with us at all, right? So, well done, Adam. You spoke to someone. You went out of your way to have a conversation.
To them that those flags would be removed.
That's contempt, Adam. It's a contempt of Parliament to remove the material of an other campaign, right? It is contempt of Parliament, and we're not talking about even splashing orange paint, over buildings or even over bollards or lampposts or the pavement, right, or whatever, right? Where it was some sort of, Angela Ditchfield presentation, right, that she gave, right? It is contempt, Adam. You're intervening in other campaigns illegally, and you don't think that there's anything wrong with it because the police are being permitted and allowed and encouraged to do it completely unlawfully with the Palestine signs when there were plenty of Palestine petitions on change.org into Parliament, and even charity groups like Helping Palestine. I don't know how those haven't been shut down, right? The police are acting illegally against Youssef and his buddies, so Youssef and his buddies are going to act illegally against other campaigns, right? And this is all because Keir Starmer and the government can't get the law right, and the police can't get the law right, and what it's creating is confusion and a mess, and then no one believes in any political rights, and then, Youssef needs to be, put in China for a while, and then, he won't be able to go out and assess what other campaigns are doing because he won't be allowed out of the house.
A couple of days, they got a bit agitated. One of them was waving in my face, saying that they'd been put back up, and for every one we took down, they would put two up. But the fact is that they're a small group of extremists.
Right, Youssef, your own people are in prison on terror charges. It's official, Youssef, right? Your side have persons that the British establishment, police force, courts, Crown Prosecution Service, newspapers have officially put in prison without a trial and said these are terrorists, not just far right, actual terrorists, Yusuf. And 50 MPs have tried to do something about it, right? But even these 50 MPs, one of them actually protested outside a prison, right? Zara Sultana, will be lucky to get your own MP even giving you a phone call back or replying to an email or actually doing anything for you, right? Let alone, combined with a group of 50 MPs, we're not allowed to speak to MPs who aren't our MPs. Apparently they won't respond to us or engage, but suddenly, when it's Jeremy Corbyn, he can suddenly click his fingers and 50 MPs will act for people who aren't even their constituents, right? Adam, you are terrorists according to the government.
We know they've got links to Tommy Robinson. We know they are extreme.
Oh, all the names are coming out now. It's like a card game. Oh, he's got Wolverine. It's like a card game. How many points have you got? Look, I've got Jack, King, Queen, Ace. I've got like Ace. Oh, I've got 4 aces. No, I've got a royal flush. And I've got two Queen of Hearts, Queen of Diamonds, and a Jack of all trades. Right? Oh, the names are coming out now. Oh, we know you've got big names on your side. VIPs. You got Tommy Robinson, Elon Musk. We've been assessing you. Because VIPs count. This is social media. Well, what have you got? Well, I've got I've got a Roger Hallam. Strength 5, skill 7. No, actually, his skill's gone down 5 points because he got fucking arrested, infiltrated by the Sun newspaper or whatever it was, right? Got locked up for 5 years or whatever, but championed on and someone was using his social media on his behalf, pretending they were Roger Hallam, right? So Roger Hallam he's lost 3 IQ points, 3 strength 7, speed 6, right? And now he's got to recover it back up again. What playing cards have you got? Oh, he's got Tommy Robinson. What he means is, they've got this bloke with Tommy Robinson, right? Oh, actually, right.
Right-wing racists.
Right. What? Let's just get this clear, right? I'm going to clarify this. Yusuf just said you're a small group of far-right extremists, right? And then he proceeded to say that, oh no, you've got Tommy Robinson, right? So that means that he's bothered that they've got Tommy Robinson with them or on their side. Why? Because Tommy Robinson commands quite a few million people, right? I think it was the police said it could have been up to 3 million who turned up, but they didn't allow them all in, right? And they're reckoning, the news said there was 150,000 walking across London Bridge, but the police said that there were 1 million to 3 million who had tried to turn up at that rally, right? Or someone said that there was about 3 million. Now, that's just not a small group of right-wing extremists, right? So Yusuf, he's completely and utterly contradicted himself in one sentence, right? He said, you're only a small group of extremists, right? And then he proceeded to say, but you got Tommy Robinson on your playing card. We know you got Tommy Robinson, which basically means that, well, you're actually not a small group of right-wing extremists. You're actually 3 million of them. And it's more than we've ever had to turn up for Extinction Rebellion in London, right? We've never had anywhere near as enough. And we're really annoyed with it and pissed off because, but the police are taking our Palestine action and putting our fellows in prison for terrorism, right? We're the actual official terrorists. I don't think that any of the Raise the Colours or none of the Raise the Colours or Stop the Boats people have actually yet been locked up for terrorism charges, right? So far, I think they've only been prosecuted for damaging those boats. So, Adam Yusuf, he's in La La Land. And it's that place, right, where the Green Party are acting purely, they're not self-reflecting on what they're saying or doing. And it's purely supposedly morally motivated. It's like meant to be that it's morally motivated, but actually it's not, because they're wrong. They're wrong about the law. They're wrong about their rights. They're the ones who actually got persons in prison, and even the MPs are trying to back them up and support them, or 50 of them, right? So Yusuf, it's terrible.
We're not welcoming them. They're not welcoming any of our communities. The huge majority of people,
But right, we are welcoming the communities because we've got a country where we've got ethnic minorities in this country, particularly in cities, right? And you know, they talk to them. I have not seen any evidence of them refusing to speak to foreign people, right, or even hurting them, right? You know, I've grown up with, you know, people. There's all kinds of different people from all different races and cultures around us all the time. I really don't know what the Green Party, what angle the Green Party are coming from on this, because they're, as it goes, they are the only ones. I mean, I know Tommy Robinson did get arrested for some offences, but I don't think it's not like they've got loads and loads and loads of people currently in prison. They had that guy, I think there was one of them who was offensive to the police, right? There was one of them, and he was from Rotherham. I forgot his name now. He's from Rotherham, and he got locked up, and he died for medical. He died from medical complications in prison, like maybe diabetes or something like that. He was offensive to a police officer, right? Which he shouldn't have been arrested for that. He shouldn't have been arrested or prosecuted or put in prison for that at all. He should have been protected for misdemeanor on that, right? Other than him and Tommy Robinson himself, there aren't like dozens and dozens of that those raise the colours persons. It's actually Adam Yusuf's people who are on terrorism charges in prison, and they won't even listen to us when we're trying to help them with their legal representations. That's the worst thing.
Scenarios like this that are diverse and open and
yeah, he just said it's diverse, right? Yusuf, you just said it is diverse, right? How did it become diverse? So if it is diverse, how can we be racist or far right? Because it is diverse. It's like saying I'm in a swimming pool and I'm wet, right? I'm not dry. So you just said we're in a country, it is diverse. It is actually diverse. It's not that, oh, it isn't diverse and they're trying to stop it becoming diverse. It is diverse, right? So they're just trying to stop it from becoming ridiculously overpopulated and losing the countryside, which actually is what Chris Packham's advocating, but in a completely different way and from a different angle and approach. And you know, the raise the colours do not seem to be getting people locked up for terrorism, whereas the Green Party do.
Positive. They're not going to...
It's not... Adam, just put your own signs up at the side of them. Do not steal other people's things and take their money, Adam, right? Use Green Party's money and your money to put your signs up to appeal to the public for your cause, Adam. Don't take other people's material down and steal it like a contemptuous thief, Adam, because you're not a sportsman. How are you advocating anything to do with morals in this country when, oh yeah, we know what you're up to, we know where you're going, so why don't you get the, why don't Carla Denyer send you a nice big cheque from the Green Party